Ivan Pace is the number 90 ranked player on my big board and my 9th ranked linebacker in this class. He played 3 seasons at Miami of Ohio before transferring to Cincinnati for his final year. Now, he is a tiny prospect at 5'11", 231 pounds, and he only has 30.25-inch arms. But he racked up tackles in 2022 with 136 tackles, 20.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 4 passes defensed, and 2 forced fumbles. He ran well at the combine, but his agilities weren't that great. It overall came out to a 5.64 relative athletic score. On the field for Cincinnati's defense, in his first year there, he was a play caller on the field for them. He's a very instinctual player who commands respect on whatever defense he is on. He has great range. He was the fastest linebacker on the GPS at the Senior Bowl, and so he doesn't just run straight line fast. He's fast on the field as well. He shoots gaps well in the running game, and he hits hard coming downhill, and he couples that with great instincts and coverage. He hits his landmarks in zone. He's got the speed to stay with guys in man coverage, but unfortunately he does get bodied by big tight ends in man coverage. In addition, as you might have guessed with his sacks, he's a really good blitzer. He times his snaps well, has a variety of speed rush moves headlined by his spin moves. If he were 6'4" instead of 5'11", we would be talking about a first-round pick, but unfortunately his size is severely limiting when projecting him to the NFL level. He just can't get off of blocks by bigger linemen, by tight ends, and he often over-pursues plays in the run game trying to get ahead of those blocks, and he leaves cutback lanes. And finally, he lacks the length to finish tackles consistently. I think Pace projects best to the NFL level as a sub-package linebacker or a guy that you can use as a pass-rushing specialist from the linebacker position. Keanu Benton is the number 89 player on my big board and my 8th rated interior defensive lineman in this draft. He was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school with a background in wrestling where he was a 2-time state qualifier and ended his career with a 48-2 record. And that background is important because he knows how to use his body positioning, as we'll get to in just a moment. He is 6'4", 309 pounds, and ran a 5.08 40-yard dash at the combine. His broad jump and his 3-cone were both 80th percentile or better, and he ended with an 8.86 relative athletic score. So this is a big, athletic guy in the trenches. In 2022, he had 36 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 2 passes defensed. He is an extremely strong player who has very good length in the trenches. He's a force on the interior of the offensive line. Usually, he will get into offensive linemen's chests and he pushes them back into the pocket. Now, he doesn't have a lot of pass rushing value, and prior to this season, he had no ability whatsoever to rush the passer, but he did show some growth this season as a pass rusher, which is really nice when projecting him to the next level. In the run game, he has excellent hand placement and grip strength, and that comes from that wrestling background. It shows up in his ability to generate leverage advantages in the gaps. Now, as for his weaknesses, he's not very explosive, and he's not very flexible in the trenches. And he doesn't have a lot of versatility, limited pass rush ability, like I mentioned earlier, but there has been growth in that area, and so hopefully as he progresses in the league, he can continue to build some bull rush techniques and some power rushing moves that he can use to make him valuable on passing downs. I think he projects best as a 0 technique or a 1 technique in an odd front gap control based defense. Maybe he could take some reps as a 4-eye tech in even fronts on a limited basis, but I think he projects best as a nose tackle for an odd front team. Derek Hall is my number 88 prospect on my big board and my 13th ranked edge rusher in this class. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school with a background in both basketball and track. In fact, he was a state finalist in the 200 meter his senior year. He was a team captain for Auburn in 2022, and he notched 40 plus pressures each of the last 2 years for the Tigers. He is 6'3", 254 pounds, just over 22 years old, and he ran a 4.57 40-yard dash at the combine, which was 94th percentile. He ended with a relative athletic score of a 9.38. In 2022 for Auburn, he had 60 tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 1 interception, 1 fumble recovery, and 2 forced fumbles. Hall is a hyper-explosive athlete. He's got an explosive first step, and he loves to threaten upfield on offensive tackles and then drive into their chest to push them back into the pocket. His speed to power rush is his best move. It's his go-to move, and it's very, very good. He has strong hands that he uses to control offensive tackles at the point of attack, and he wins with body position and leverage. On top of that, for his size, he's pretty physical in the run game, although he's not going to be the best edge setter at 6'2". He can bend around the edge on athletic tackles, but if they jump set at him, a lot of times it takes away his build-up power, and so that's how tackles in the SEC were able to mitigate some of his speed to power rushes. And when that happened, you could see that he's a little underdeveloped as a pass rusher. That speed to power, it's his go-to move, but it's really only the only move that he has, and so he is going to need to flesh out his pass rush arsenal, put a few more tools in the toolbox at the next level. I think he fits best as a 3-4 outside linebacker in the NFL. You could use him in a wide 9 alignment out of a 4-3 at defensive end, but I think he's going to be best if he can rush from a stand-up stance in the NFL. Jalen Duncan is the number 87 player on my big board and my 14th rated offensive lineman in the draft. He has been a starter at Maryland since 2019 at left tackle, over 40 games experience starting on the left side of the line. He is 6'6", 306 pounds, that's 48th percentile height, 24th percentile weight, and he ran really well at the combine and jumped well, and that turned into a 9.44 relative athletic score. He'll be a 22-year-old prospect. He'll turn 23 during his rookie season. He has prototypical size at the offensive tackle position, and he's very athletic despite his size. He's able to pull into space as a run blocker, and he can tag second-level defenders in the running game. And his feet are really quick in pass sets. His footwork looks really good. Just watching that, you would think that this guy could be a first-round pick, but then it all goes south with his hands. He has really bad hands in pass protection. He lunges at defenders at times, getting overeager, trying to initiate contact, and that usually comes on the heels of being late with his hand strikes. And all of those things get him off balance. So he's either lunging and off balance, or he allows power rushers into his chest, and he really struggles to anchor against those power rushers once they're into his chest. So there's a lot of technical refinement needed in that aspect of his game. And for as good as he is on the move, he does fail to sustain blocks in the run game downfield. He can get out, he can tag linebackers and safeties on the move, but they're usually able to shed his blocks. And so this is an athletic guy who needs a lot of technical refinement. You don't want to take Jalen Duncan to be a starter early in his career, but I do think he has some long-term potential as a developmental left tackle if they can get his hand placements, his hand strikes right, and he can start to engage and sustain those blocks for longer periods of time. Luke Wypler is the number 86 player on my big board, and he is my 13th ranked offensive lineman in the draft. Wypler was a 4-star recruit who became a 2-season starter at center for Ohio State. He is 6'3", 303 pounds, which is a little undersized at center, but he's very athletic. He had a 9.29 relative athletic score from his combine testing. In his 2 years as a starter and 26 career starts, he allowed only 1 sack and 14 hurries. Wypler is a very technically sound athlete. He's not the strongest guy, but he wins with technique and positioning, and he understands how to use leverage to his advantage to mitigate bigger pass rushers. On top of that, he has great athleticism that allows him to climb to the second level. In blocking schemes, he can pull, and he can even execute reach blocks in the running game. And a lot of that's made possible because of his great agility and his 10-yard splits. Those were all very good. This is an explosive athlete. Now, he struggles at times to anchor, especially against bigger interior rushers that line up as a 0 technique or a 1 technique. If he is forced onto an island against a bigger rusher, he has a hard time sinking his hips and dropping anchor. He'll get walked back into the quarterback. And so he's going to have to improve his functional strength at the next level. But he's relatively young. He's only 21 years old. There's plenty of room for physical development there. And then the other thing I notice is that he's a little slow out of his stance at times. For an undersized center that's going to try to win with technique and athleticism, he needs to be quicker out of his stance. He's slow to get his hands up after snaps at times and allows those rushers to get into his chest. At the next level, he is a center only. He doesn't have the frame that's going to transition to guard. He needs to be a center, and it would be ideal if he lands with a team that runs a zone-heavy scheme to allow him to use his athleticism and his leverage and agility abilities to get out on the move in blocking schemes. Andre Carter II is the number 85 player on my big board and my 12th ranked edge rusher in the class. He was a 0-star recruit coming out of high school, and he played wide receiver and tight end. He committed to Army, and he made the transition to playing defensive end, and he had a great 2022 campaign with 17 tackles for loss and 14.5 sacks. He was an elite player. Then in 2022, his production fell off. He had 41 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, and 2 passes defensed. Now, a lot of that was due to opponents' game planning specifically to take him out of the game. He has a unique profile. He is 6'7", which is 96th percentile for edge rushers, but only 256 pounds, which is 30th percentile, and he only got 11 reps on the bench, which is 0th percentile. All in all, he has a 6.1 relative athletic score. Now, this is a very athletic player. He has superb height and length. He's really bendy. He has fluid feet. He tested really well in his agilities at the combine, and he can make all the transitions you would want him to make while pass rushing. He also showed the ability to drop into zone coverage at times for Army, although I do think that should be limited at the next level because every aspect of his game needs refining, and you can really only focus on one thing at a time. So I would like to see him just be a pass rushing specialist early in his career. Now, he has a very slight frame, and he has a massive lack of functional strength, and a lot of that is due to weight restrictions at Army. He wasn't able to lift weights and put on strength. He can bulk up in an NFL weight room, but it's going to take time, and so this is a developmental player whose timeline is longer than your average rookie. He also lacks polish in any aspect of his game due to the late transition he made to defense. Carter is a high character guy who I think you would love to have in your locker room. I think he projects best as a 3-4 outside linebacker who can rush the passer early in his career, while he looks to add bulk to become active in the running game and in coverage. Sam Laporta is the number 84 player on my big board and my 6th ranked tight end in the class. He played wide receiver and defensive back in high school before transitioning to tight end at Iowa. He also has a background in basketball and track. He is 6'3", 245 pounds, which is on the lower end of the spectrum for tight ends, but he tested through the roof at the combine with a 4.59 40-yard dash, which is 90th percentile, and he ended up with a 9.49 relative athletic score. In 2022, he had 58 receptions for 657 yards and 1 touchdown. Over the last 2 seasons, he led Iowa in receiving with nearly double the production of the number 2 target. He lined up in line and in the slot for Iowa, so he has versatility. You can use him in different ways. He's a very crisp route runner with good hands. He's a natural pass catcher, and he has really good yards after the catch ability. He had 30 broken tackles on 111 catches over the last 2 years, which is just outstanding for a tight end prospect. He also has good technique in his blocking assignments. His hand placement's good, his footwork, but he does struggle to sustain blocks, largely due to his lack of strength at the point of attack, something that I think could be worked on at the NFL level. As for his weaknesses, he really struggles when he's contested at the catch point. It goes back to his frame and his body size and the strength, and he struggles to bring in those contested catches. and he doesn't do a very good job of using his body to shield off defenders to create uncontested catches. It's something you'll see other tight ends, bigger tight ends in this class, do a much better job of than LaPorta. He also has poor block targeting out in space. I think he is an ideal developmental tight end. I think he's versatile. I think you could put him in line. You wouldn't want to do that a ton early in his career until you refine his blocking technique, get that strength up. But I do think he's a versatile piece that in years 2, 3, and 4 and beyond could play anywhere that you want him to and do almost anything that you ask. Travius Hodges-Tomlinson is the number 83 overall player on my big board and my 18th ranked defensive back in the class. He is the nephew of NFL Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson, but he's made a name for his own at the collegiate level, where he was first team all-conference in the Big 12 in both 2020 and 2021, before becoming the Jim Thorpe Award winner in 2022. He is 5'8", 178 pounds, and has 29-inch arms, and so he's extremely small with a small wingspan. But he did run a 4.41 40 at the Combine, and he ended with a 7.95 relative athletic score. In 2022, he had 50 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, and he had 21 forced incompletions, which was the most in the country. Hodges-Tomlinson has very smooth footwork, and his hips are fluid. It allows him to mirror wide receivers and man coverage very well. I think he ran fine at the Combine, but he looks even faster than that on tape, though. He's an explosive athlete. He's a good tackler, especially for his size, and he plays very, very physically. He's not afraid to stick his nose in the fan, to come down and to hit. He also breaks really well on the ball from off-coverage techniques. As for his weaknesses, he does get caught looking in the backfield sometimes, and he's susceptible to double moves when teams use his aggressiveness against him. Also, as you would expect from his size, he struggles to get off of blocks in the run game, and he also struggles to contest bigger receivers in jump ball situations. They can simply go up over him and make a play on the ball. Even though he had a 39-inch vertical, he's just working from such a disadvantage. And he is grabby. He recorded 14 penalties last season. So he's an exciting player. He's got some limitations, most of them due to his size. I think he fits best in the NFL as an off-zone corner, so you can protect him from pressing, and you can allow him to use his aggressiveness triggering downfield and hopefully protect him from those deep jump ball situations. Tanner McKee is the number 82 player on my big board and my 7th ranked quarterback in the class. He is 6'6" and weighs 231 pounds. He spent 2 years on a Latter-day Saints mission in Brazil prior to attending Stanford, so he is a little on the older side for a prospect at almost 23 years old. In 2022, McKee completed 62% of his passes for 2,947 yards, which is 6.9 yards per attempt, while throwing 13 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. He has great size at the QB position, ranking 90th percentile for height and 81st percentile for weight. He's a highly accurate passer who distributes the ball well to the short and intermediate areas of the field with confidence, and I think he ranks second to only C.J. Stroud as the best pure pocket passer in this class. But a pocket passer is all that he really is. He doesn't possess the ability to create outside of structure, and he struggles mightily when under pressure. In 2022, his completion percentage dropped from 66.5% when given a clean pocket to 41% when pressured. And pressure is not always an offensive line stat. A lot of times it comes down to quarterback, and there's a lot of instances on tape of Tanner McKee contributing to pressure with poor pocket awareness. He has poor agility, and he's often unable to slide in the pocket to avoid pressure and then reset to throw. To cap all of that off, he's only got average arm strength. It's not a liability, but he doesn't have the strong arm you would want if you're taking mobility off the table. McKee is a pocket passer with bad pocket presence in a league that increasingly eschews immobile quarterbacks in favor of athleticism and improvisational skills. McKee will likely be a day 2 prospect, but he's not a quarterback that I would want to build my franchise around. Nick Herbig is the number 81 player on my big board. He is my 8th ranked linebacker in the class. He is a 4-star recruit with a basketball background. He's actually the brother of Nate Herbig, who is a current offensive guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Herbig became a starter halfway through his freshman year in 2020, and he never looked back. He is 6'2", 240 pounds, and ran a 4.65 40. He also had 25 reps on the bench, which is 75th percentile, and overall had a 9.28 relative athletic score. In 2022, he had 47 tackles, 15.5 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 2 passes defensed, and 2 forced fumbles. The first thing you notice when you look at Herbig is that his skills don't match his physique. He is an edge rusher in an off-ball linebacker's body, and I'm not sure what position a team is going to put him in. I'm classifying him as a linebacker. But I do think as a pass rusher, he bends around the edge well, and he has a nice inside counter move to get into the B-gap when tackles overset to play his speed. He has a good pass rush plans and production. He's got a lot of tools in the tool chest when it comes to rushing the passer. Also, over 26% of his career tackles resulted in lost yardage, so he's a tackle for loss machine. He's very good at chasing down runs from the backside. However, I think he's too small to be a full-time edge rusher, and so the question for teams becomes, how are you going to use him? He has limited reps in coverage at the college level. He only had 46 total man coverage snaps when he was at school. So can he be effective as a coverage guy? That's asking him to play away from his strength. And he also struggles as a run side defender on the front. He can't anchor and set the edge against double teams. I think he fits best as a 4-3 Sam linebacker or a 3-4 Will linebacker, which will allow him to maximize his pass rushing opportunities and minimize his chances to be an edge setter in the running game. And that will wrap up part 2 of my NFL Draft Big Board series, this one ranking my number 81 through 90 players on my big board. If you like this content, be sure and click that subscribe button here on YouTube. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. I will have videos breaking down every player in my top 100 by draft night. You can also give me a follow on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL, where I'll be tweeting out shorts from these live during the draft in late April.